Welcome to Next Steps to Leadership with your host, Dr. Stephen Oliver. In each episode, we invite experts to share their passion and their leadership journey to help you in your next steps. You can find this show on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, hrcvision.com. Now here's the host of Next Steps to Leadership, Dr. Stephen Oliver.
Well, hello and welcome to everyone. As the intro said, I'm Dr. Stephen Oliver, or Dr. O, and welcome to my podcast, Next Steps to Leadership. The goal of this podcast is to help you in your journey on leadership and what are the next steps that you're taking. And I have invited some executives and senior leaders and coaches and teachers to talk about their journey to leadership and how they can give you some examples of the next steps you can take. And this is connected to my consulting company, HRC Vision. So welcome. We're really glad to have you. So I'm very excited today. I have one of my very favorite people in life, Dr. Patty Sullivan. And it's so exciting to have her. Dr. Sullivan and I go way back. She was actually my student years ago in a master's program at Temple University, and she did really well. She was one of those students who had a lot of answers in class, and that was great because sometimes I would ask the class questions and no one would answer, and then Patty would respond, and so she really helped out with really good things. When she finished the class, she went into her master's thesis, and she asked if I could be her faculty advisor. It was an organizational development thesis. I didn't really need to advise anything. Patty had everything together. She was doing a study on her organization and a plan for organizational development in her company, and it was really great. After she successfully passed the graduate thesis and graduated, we became friends. And then she asked about teaching, and there was actually a position open at Villanova University for a human resource course. And she said, well, would you consider me? And I said, well, it's up to the students. Come in and guest lecture, and it's up to them. And she had glowing reviews. They hired her, and she's there today. And we become very good friends and colleagues over the years. And over the years, I just thought she should go and get her doctorate. It was probably none of my business, but I just thought she'd be a great scholar and professor. And so I encouraged her, and she did. She went and got her PhD and does a lot of things. So welcome, Patty. How are you today?
I am lovely, and thank you, Dr. O, for letting me be here with you. I'm delighted. It is a beautiful day, and life is good, so I am well. Thank you.
Well, that's fantastic. And you can see outside of my window, it's sunny. It's been cold, but we're supposed to get up to 50 on the East Coast this week. So very excited about that. So let me introduce Dr. Sullivan, and then we're going to have our discussion in the podcast. Dr. Sullivan does a lot of things. I'm amazed in what she does. She is a human resources and organizational development professional for many years and has worked in industry, manufacturing, and other industries. She currently does coaching for executives, and she coaches and helps them in their journey in leadership, the ups and downs of leadership. She is an adjunct faculty at both Villanova University and American University in Washington, D.C. She does a lot of things with the Society for Human Resource Management in Tampa, Florida. She actually, if you don't mind, you live in St. Petersburg, so it's warmer there than where I am.
No doubt, no doubt.
But she does a lot of things with the Society for Human Resource Management, with their certification and a lot of their courses. And she does instructional design. And then she also does a lot of other things. She is a certified yoga therapist and energy leadership coach. And so helps people with energy and leadership in yoga. And she'll tell you more about that. And then she does conflict resolution. And then, as I mentioned, she has her PhD in leadership, and focused on her dissertation on self awareness. And that's what we're going to be discussing today, self awareness, from the University of South Florida. And then she'll tell you more, but she's a mom and a grandmom, three beautiful grandchildren. I've met them all, they're wonderful. So she's also travels a lot around the country and the world, and does a lot of bicycling, cycling, and is a wine enthusiast. So welcome again. You are a very busy person.
It sounds like I'm a really busy person, but I'm happy to say I have a great work-life balance. So many of the things that you shared, yoga therapy, um, the idea of conflict resolution, these are really supplemental learning opportunities I took to become a better executive coach. And the yoga therapy is, I've never taught a yoga class except for volunteering at an inner city school and an older person's home. So I've never even taught a yoga class, but I do yoga therapy as a way to enhance my coaching skills because work, life, human, professional really are just one, and what's going on in somebody's physical well-being, mental well-being certainly impacts their ability to be their best on the job or not. So it sounds like I do a lot of things, but really I just coach and I'm an adjunct. And with that, I bring and a consultant, but I bring some best practices in terms of either leadership development or academia. But I bring the concept of mind, body, and spirit together. And for those people whose spirit is an offensive word, let's just say that's life purpose. It doesn't have to be anything religious if that's an area that you would like to avoid. So, um, yeah, as an executive coach, I get to work with great people. And as an adjunct professor for SHRM and Villanova and American, I get to just plant different seeds for people so that they're challenged to think a little differently than their normal mental models or habits of the minds that they have.
Well, that's wonderful. And best practices are so important for leaders, and, to look at the practices we currently do and what can be best. I will add one more thing. I teach emotional intelligence in the workplace at the University of Virginia, and Dr. Sullivan comes in every year graciously and does a lecture within the class and really reinforces some of these best practices. So hopefully we'll have some time to talk about a few of them. So Dr. Sullivan, I wanted to start out. We're going to talk about self-awareness, and this is one of the hallmarks of emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence is not a new concept; it's been around for many years, but it's coming back more into the consciousness of American workplace and actually home, and people are thinking more about it. And so I wanted to know if you could just give us a basic overview of what is emotional intelligence before we go into that first hallmark of it.
Sure. So I guess research or the gurus, the studies would define emotional intelligence as the ability to successfully recognize and regulate emotions in ourselves and also in others. So you know how some people who are considered high and low and they don't seem to have that even keel. You don't know what you're walking into in a day. People with high EQ know how to recognize and regulate their own emotions, but then also be able to support whatever it is that's going on in the meeting or in the at the dinner table, and they're able to help other people without them necessarily even knowing, in order to optimize an outcome, to either deflate some things that are getting emotionally difficult for some people, or to bring out the joy in others if they don't, or if they're not recognizing the benefits. So um, decades of research certainly show that the level of EQ, emotional intelligence, certainly aligns regularly, positively, with a person's professional success as well as their happiness. And this EQ is true for whether or not you're a receptionist or a plumber, or if you're an executive. Obviously, if you're an executive, you have more influence over more people, so you're going to recognize it more. So, think of EQ as our own way to find success in our jobs and happiness in life, and also bring other people along for that ride.
It's a great definition. And again, the emotional intelligence can translate to both the workplace, at home, community, wherever you are. So, we're going to talk about one of the first hallmarks of emotional intelligence, and that's self awareness. And I love what you said years ago that to really understand the broad base of emotional intelligence or EQ, you really need to understand yourself first and be self-aware, and then that kind of led you into your dissertation, your PhD. Anything you wanted to comment about the PhD and some of your research?
Sure. So my PhD is in instructional design or adult education, adult development. My research for all 6 years, it shouldn't have taken me 6 years, but it did, for all 6 years, was around either self awareness, leadership effectiveness, or engagement, employee engagement. No
Mm.
matter what course I had, they were the things that was researching, because I knew in the very beginning I wanted to prove, although we don't say that that's actually the case when we have these kind of research studies, but I wanted to show a strong correlation between self awareness, which is the foundational concept of the EQ models that are out there. I wanted to show that the higher a person's self awareness, the more effective they would be as a leader in the workplace. So these were my passions when I went into it. And that's really all I looked into in terms of any type of, and every class you had a research project of some kind to build what it was you were doing. So I was really fortunate to know when I went in class one, I didn't know what my question was. I didn't know what my
Mhm.
final research topic would be. That's an arm wrestling match with those people that are part of my board or chair.
Right. Yeah.
Um, yeah, but I knew it was going to relate to awareness and leadership effectiveness. And the reason why self awareness, when I was a kid, I was not the smartest in my family. What
Mhm.
I mean by that is I'm one of 11, so there was a good
Right.
sample population for me to take a look at.
Exactly.
And I recognized some people were really great at math and science, and it came easy. They didn't have to do really any homework. I also recognized other people were really great at making other people feel good to build up, the dinner table or, the Christmas morning or whatever it was. So I saw these different skill sets even as a kid. I was not able to articulate that, but I always found it curious. And um, in my family, there's people who are very smart intellectually, and also some of them have a lot of self awareness as well. And it's a beautiful thing to see compared to somebody who's just intellectually intelligent and then they make other people feel lesser than
Mhm.
because of that skill set. So yeah, it was more of being a little observing, not being great in school. And as soon as I learned that there were these different multiple intelligences, like my confidence just exponentially improved. And I didn't have to, be a disciplinarian as an HR person. I could be
Mhm.
curious. I could provide space for people to come up with their own answer or to, come up with their own um, fault or what it is that they did to help escalate a
Mhm.
conflict. So yeah, it was really a transformational learning experience, learning experience for myself. So yeah, it's a pretty neat thing for sure.
Well, that's great. Thank you for sharing about your story and your history and your past. And so many people grow in their emotions as they get older and life experiences. I mean, I like the way you touched on our IQ, our intelligence quotient, about our cognitive abilities, but then the emotional intelligence, or EQ, your emotional quotient, is about your maturity and your understanding of emotions and yourself and others. And that grows with time. And I think we all are still growing on our EQ. if we're open and receptive to it. So that's the key. You got to be open and receptive to it. So, um,
Yeah, and I think for people who this is new, think of IQ as like your minimum requirement to do a job, and
yes,
then your EQ is going to get you to that next level of greatness that you want to get to.
exactly. And we do need both of them together. And by the way, Dr. Sullivan, the average for many dissertations is 10 years. So I think you're fine.
I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Somewhere around that time. Not all, but so I wanted to ask you, how can someone hone in on their EQ or really hone in on their self awareness? How can you be self aware of yourself, if you will?
So I think there are a couple things that are natural or developed in people who are striving to become self-aware and enhance emotional intelligence. One of them, I think, is being non-judgmental to yourself, being able to look at the good, the bad, the ugly, a Clint Eastwood great movie,
Mhm.
right? The good, the bad, the ugly, but without judgment, more contemplation, reflection, and interest or curiosity. So I think in therapy, we would call that appreciative inquiry, where we don't want to jump to conclusions. And so the number one thing I would say is to be non-judgmental in your evaluation. Um, that's not always easy. The second one is to actually be reflective and take the time through either journaling activities or um, some people do mind maps, they draw different things, but find a way to really reflect on a day and or a season or a project, but really go back to um, being non-judgmental, making sure we have time for reflection, and that reflection to me goes with having a growth mindset, Carol Dweck's
Mhm.
work, right? Or
Yes.
being somebody who is always learning. So being a learner and certainly being non-judgmental, I think are two of the caveats for people who can get past where they are to become a better, more happy and confident person that they want to be.
Yes, wonderful. I love Dr. Dweck, growth mindset versus fixed mindset. And the growth mindset is open to change, open to ideas, open to self improvement. A fixed mindset is why do we have to change it? It's not broken. I don't want to do this. I don't want to learn anything more. Just keep it the way it is. And you see both of those types of folks in industry. So I am wanting to just touch on one thing about self awareness, Dr. Sullivan. What about triggers, trigger points? What are those, and how do those impact our self awareness?
Yeah. So, from a coaching standpoint, we can look at many things. And what I mean by that is triggers are just one of them. When we think about becoming our best selves, and that's what executive coaching really is all about, helping
Mhm.
somebody to find that space without judgment to try new things and be a little vulnerable. But to me, the whole process includes understanding our strengths, our weaknesses, our biases,
Mhm.
our
Yes.
fears, our triggers. All of these things come into play. And that's not it. It's also, um, how we were raised and our, mental models around just our thoughts. We can call them um, um, mental models or limiting beliefs. And that's usually from where we come from, right? We were raised in a family that had certain thoughts, and as kids, we just accepted them. So this is an opportunity to change those. So triggers are just one of many things. So you can think about um, biases in terms of obviously our things that we need to recognize for EEO and illegal bias. But we also have other biases. We have biases that are not illegal, but also stop us from being the best critical thinkers we can be. And those biases might be around a diversity of thought,
Hmm.
diversity of opinion. Look at all the divisiveness in the world today, right? So just imagine if people could love the presidential candidates, one of them right now, and be okay that there's another whole group of people that loves the other one.
Hmm.
Doesn't mean you believe what they believe, but you don't have to then all of a sudden put an entire judgment on a group of people who have certain thoughts. That's not good for anybody. So those biases aren't illegal, but they sure do harm for
Hmm.
families and businesses. And also, we can look at our triggers when it comes to, or our limiting beliefs when it comes to generations. We
Right.
have,
Yes.
I guess, baby boomers. The traditionalists are like 80, so they're probably out of here, right, of the workplace, except for those that want to continue. But for the most part, it's baby boomers to Zoomers, and people are really good at saying, "Well, millennials do this, and the baby boomers aren't good at technology." By the way, who defined and developed and designed this? It was a boomer, right? So let's not make big assumptions. Whereas the Zoomers, they oftentimes haven't had the opportunity to learn social skills because they've been during COVID. They grew up on their phone. They went to college in COVID instead of trying to figure out those dynamics. So there's so many similarities in terms of triggers that way, or biases that way, that limit our ability to be solution focused, objective, and being just respectful and kind. Be kind to all kinds, right?
Well, great thoughts and great advice. And I love your HR background eking into your comments. I mean, unfortunately, there's so many things that are said in the workplace, and it can go to the Equal Opportunity Commission, EEO. And so we have to be careful and mindful about that, especially managers and leaders, of what's said. And then the triggers and biases, that's really, really powerful. One more thing before I'm gonna ask you about coaching is the self-regulation or the self-management piece of this, because that's connected to self-awareness, and that's the second hallmark of emotional intelligence, depending on what theorist is writing about it. Um, how do triggers and biases, how do we regulate or manage them? How can we be careful about what we're saying and thinking and doing?
This is actually where I think yoga therapy and the concept of yoga comes in. So, for many people, we think of yoga and doing these wonderful balancing poses or strengthening poses. But really, in yoga, there's 8 limbs, and the poses are only one thing. Another key part of yoga is discipline. And that can go back
Mhm.
to Malcolm Gladwell's tipping
Yes.
point or 10,000
Yes.
hours of practice, right? But in yoga, the only way we get better at anything is through discipline. And discipline doesn't mean being a disciplinarian. It means having habits that are regular, consistent, and we stick to even on days we don't want to. So, with all of the regulation thing, it's practice and it takes years. If anything, maybe it's even a lifelong journey, because once you think you overcame some triggers,
Hmm.
there's always another one that can pop up every once in a while. Um, and that will pop up, not can, it will pop up. So here you are, you think you're, bringing calm and clarity to any kind of situation, and then all of a sudden somebody will say something, and all of a sudden your back's straighter, the hair's on the back of your neck,
Hmm.
you're in fighting mode. So the idea is, um, I mean, fighting mode, just defense, not, let me be clear, I'm not talking
Yeah.
about anything physical, but defending yourself. So the whole idea of regulation is this concept of discipline from yoga. It's also a growth mindset from
Mhm.
when we're talking about Carol Dweck. It's a person who is a lifelong learner, right? These kind of things help us in bringing clarity around our thoughts, good or bad, right? If they have a label, bringing clarity around that and what it's about.
Right. Well, that's great. That is wonderful, and giving us some thoughts about that, because it's so important, in the self-awareness, to be aware of yourself and aware of your triggers, but then how do we manage and regulate those? And you, you're right. Once we get a handle on a set of them, then a whole new set comes as we go through our journey in life. So
There's
that's
a lot of
wonderful.
cobwebs. There's a lot of cobwebs inside that, we just want to help to let be free and, get past them.
Right, they do come up. So I wanted to ask you a little bit, Dr. Sullivan, about your executive coaching practice, what you were talking about. First of all, can you remind us what coaching is and executive coaching is? And then we'll talk a little bit about what you do in your practice.
Yeah, so the term coaching can be used in many things, first of all, right? We know there's sports coaches, we've been around
Hmm.
them forever. There's the generalist, and then there's also the pitching coach, right? The specialist. We
Hmm.
can say that for
Yes.
executive coach as well. There's also the term coaching that has been pretty prevalent in the workplace over the last 10 or 15 years. And oftentimes that can mean one of two things: coaching before discipline. So it's having a coaching conversation. But the real term for an outside coach in an executive or a leadership view is the idea of, I do not have the answers for you as the client. I believe you have your answers, but it's all
Hmm.
of these other things that are getting in the way: external forces, our own limiting beliefs, our biases. And a coach's job is to provide a place and time for people to work through things, be vulnerable without it impacting how people in the workplace see them. And just, when you think about a CEO, that person doesn't have any peer to talk to other than other CEOs, right? Not all CEOs are high performing. So that's not
Right.
always it's not always the best way. Whereas if you're a manager, then you have peers to talk to. You can brainstorm, you
Hmm.
can, you know, you can vent, you can ask for recommendations. But a CEO may appear to be unwavering or unsure if he were to bring his vulnerabilities or
Right.
her concerns to the people. So the idea of executive coaching is providing executives with the appropriate space without judgment for them to figure out how to do things better
Mhm.
for themselves and for their people.
That's great. That helps to give clarity for this. Now, how do you go into that, relationship? How do you first move into that and create this space for them?
Yeah, so I'm going to say most, if not all, most relationships start with an intake form. I'm asking questions. I'm asking about their strengths, and I'm observing how confident they are talking about their good.
Hmm.
I'm asking them about their what keeps them up at night. So it would be open-ended, empowering questions that I'm asking them to think about. And our first session really is a free session in that we get together and I tell them what coaching is and is not. And we do a mini coaching session on something that they've brought up. If that session is something that felt right to them, like I'm the right person for them, and I believe that I can be of value to them, then they have an opportunity to move forward. So it starts with open ended, empowering questions
Hmm.
and having them think about some things, but for me to also learn about them and where they want to be. In terms of providing safe space, it
Hmm.
really takes a couple sessions before they recognize, wait, she really isn't judging me. Like, there is not, you should do it this way, or I know the right answer for you. It really is based on providing maybe some new information and asking how they feel about that, or based on what it is they've been doing, giving two or three different homework assignments and
Hmm.
asking them, does one of those sit right with them? Or do they have something else in mind? So, even what their SMART goals are after every session, even that is set up in a way that it's all about what's right for them at the time that they need it. The other thing with, I love training and development. It
Hmm.
is um, my master's was OD with a lot of training and development
Yes.
involved in it. My PhD is adult education. Like, I love training and development. But when you go to a session,
Hmm.
that session only has, if we're lucky, a little bit for the person attending, right? Like, if you have an 8-hour workshop, maybe people are already good at some things, or maybe they don't even want to be good at it. So they're going to be checking out if they're voluntold to show up for this. In coaching, executives don't have time for 8 hours to get one nugget out of it. So these short 45-minute sessions are 100% their focus, which is really powerful and a positive return on investment for sure.
That's fantastic. That's great. I'm ready to sign up. um,
It's powerful for
yeah.
sure.
How about if anyone is failing or they're not achieving their goals or they're frustrated during your time with them? What might be some strategies to kind of turn that around or get them back on track?
Huh. So it's interesting, but every person comes to sessions in a different way. One person might be happy if they got finished one of 3 things that they said they were going to do. Other people might be upset if they completed more but didn't do it to their perfectionist level.
Hmm.
So I'm going to say there's not one right answer. It really depends on the
Yes.
person that I got to know. Um, for sure, I talk about personal accountability for them, and so that they can talk about it with their team, and how that helps to create their brand or their legacy. So for some people, they're not having success in a week. Like we usually meet once a week or once every
Mhm.
2 weeks for the first 10 or 12 sessions. But if they're not showing up, then there's a reason for it. So instead of me, again, being judgmental, I'm going to be more curious. Was it because the assignment that they chose to do didn't sit right with them? Was it the wrong timing? Or was it just like life threw too many other things at them and they needed to prioritize something else? So I don't believe there's one right answer. I think it depends on the individual in front of me and coming up with the root cause of
Mhm.
either something going not as they planned. Another thing in terms of that is there are some people who are not, they don't get positive feedback all the time. The higher up you are, people don't usually say, hey, unless they're, brown nosers, but they don't usually say, hey, you did a great job in that meeting. So the executives don't usually hear that because most people report to them and
Mhm.
expect them to do a great job in the meeting. So in a coaching session, when somebody comes and it's not working for them, again, finding out what's going on, it's also an opportunity to remind them of, by the way, you did this, this, and this so far. You're finding success here. Like I'm supposed to be their cheerleader as well, so that they recognize the value in, being heard, that they're on the right path, they're doing a good job. That then filters down to the people that they interact with, right? When they can feel that and sense that.
That's fantastic. And you're right. It depends on that individual and what's going on. And that's great that you can assess that and use different strategies. You've kind of already said this, but Patty, what's the connection to self awareness and emotional intelligence in this coaching when you're doing the coaching and get them to be self aware?
Yep. So most of the models show that self awareness is the foundational principle.
Hmm.
If you don't know your own triggers,
Hmm.
your own defenses, your own limiting beliefs, then you're not going to be as um, optimally able to impact other people. So self awareness is, again, reflection, contemplation, journaling, so that the competencies of EQ, like inspirational leadership, building great teams, conflict resolution, these things that we need from our managers at all levels. Um, you can be your best in conflict resolution when you recognize, wait, my bias is I work with this person a lot
Hmm.
and I trust this person, but I don't know this person. So I really need to make sure I'm being as objective as I can, trying to understand the person that I don't know compared to this person that I work with day in, day out, right? So just recognizing where your biases are, where your prejudices
Hmm.
are, and where your beliefs are around any situation, it's going to allow you to be more objective and be better in terms of building teams, developing others, all the things that we're needing. And leaders today, so let me go back. I think the best leaders over the years have always had a beautiful two-prong approach: the human side of the person and delivering results, right? Leaders have to deliver results.
Mhm.
Otherwise, they're not in the right role. And the best leaders recognize they do this with relationships, with people that are working for them, with their peers. They're good at building relationships. That's what the best leaders have been doing for
Mhm.
years, I believe.
Yes, that's so
They're
powerful.
really they're really struggling today, though, because of just so much of what's going on. So how do we act and be responsive to a person today with mental health challenges, with fear of COVID, with um, um, racial concerns, Jewish concerns, like all of these things that are out there? Psychological safety is not a given when we come into the
Mhm.
workplace, or it's not a given because of what our home or community environment is like, or for the people who are always on social media that make it seem that everybody is this angry. But anyway, leaders today can't just focus on delivering results and building relationships, which I think the
Mhm.
best leaders did. They also have to be a cheerleader. They have to be a psychotherapist. They have to be a
Mhm.
wellness counselor. We used to say separate work and life, and we're seeing that that's not possible in the tumultuous and
Mhm.
divisive world that we're living in today. So now we're asking people to understand, what is psychological safety and how are you responsible for bringing that to the
Mhm.
workplace? And what about, a Gen Z person who might not have the same social skills as a baby boomer? By the way, some of the research is saying that Zoomers are actually very similar to baby boomers.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
love this because they're angry at how the parents left their world. You think of boomers like Vietnam and all that turmoil
Mhm.
that was there. So there's some people who study generations that's like there's more in common there than we want to believe, which is a lovely thing. But all of these things, leaders are being expected to manage well as strategically look to the future. And that's asking a lot of our managers.
Mhm.
So self awareness and self care will help them be able to do that as they're being a psychotherapist. Not legally, you can't, promote anything that way if you don't have a medical degree and all of that. But um, or for those that are feeling insecure because, um, how many people are saying they're not putting up Hanukkah things this year because of
Mhm.
fear of being recognized as Jewish. Then we have the whole idea of the mental health crisis in the US.
Mhm.
So there's a lot leaders are dealing with. So if they can think of themselves as always learning and self-aware, it might be one of those things that um, differentiates them and their organization
Mhm.
from other businesses.
Well, that's great. That's fantastic. And I think that what you just said leads to about three more podcasts on bias and relationships and continued self awareness. So, just a couple more questions. This has been fantastic. We could talk so long. Are there some activities or practices or habits you can suggest? I'm actually looking at your lecture from the summer, and you have a whole list of activities. What are a couple you might recommend? You mentioned journaling as one.
So I think the concept of journaling goes hand in hand with what science is even showing. Really, pen and paper,
Mhm.
not using a typewriter, but something happens in our brain that brings together different synapses. It lights up different areas when we are contemplative, reflective, and we're using paper and pen or paper and pencil to do just that. So I think getting in a habit of journaling is probably the best way to become get a habit going or a discipline of contemplation and reflection. And one of the things that I journal, and you can journal all different kinds of ways. I have two mantras in my life, and one of them is, with every interaction, I have the opportunity to build a person up or knock that person down. I strive to choose wisely. So at the end of the day, I think about every person I interacted with, from the person who made me a coffee to my grandkids to, a client. And I kind of think about, did I build them up or knock them down? And by the way, when my triggers come out in my family, I still recognize that I knock people down. And that is an
Mhm.
area for me to focus, more family than other people. And that family's just really great at that. We know.
Yes, yes.
Um, so that's one thing. Um, and then, so journaling and picking what it is. It could be a gratitude journal. What are you
Mhm.
grateful for every day? Add one more thing, and it can't be repetitive, what you already had. It kind of helps reshape the mind instead of always worrying. I also believe the best leaders are always learning. So a book a
Mhm.
month at the minimum, a podcast a week at the
Mhm.
minimum, of research based, not social media and
Right.
people who have no right to be telling us whether or not we should be vaccinated or not. Like people who are scientific and those kind of things we should be listening to. So I love some podcasts that are out there that are research based,
Mhm.
in terms of nutrition. Um, Also, being in nature, there's really something powerful and healing, especially if you're an inner city person who doesn't have, the beach right there where you can walk. But there is something to be said about a level of happiness that goes with learning, and a level of happiness that
Mhm.
goes with being out in nature. And recognizing that. We can also talk about what are our core values. Most people don't do that. Like,
Mhm.
what is it that is non negotiable in our life? And then where is it actually that you're not living it fully? So, just being aware of our core values and how it is that we are showing those or not, when we're interacting with people, I think that is a good thing. Yoga, in terms of the 8 limbs, not just the poses, and the poses are wonderful for flexibility, strength, and all of that, but that's meditation, prayer, contemplation,
Mhm. Uh-huh.
deep breathing activities. My God, just Google
Mhm.
3-part breath and do that twice a day for the next month, and
Mhm.
life will be a little better. You'll be more centered. You'll be, more grounded. So we can also maybe become really good at not telling people what to do, instead being really curious. Stephen Covey would love that, right?
Mhm.
Seek first to fully
Right.
understand, and really just get really good at being curious with your 2-year-old, um, with your life partner, with your adult child. Be more interested in what they're trying to get across, instead of assuming that we know exactly what they mean when they have one sentence in front of us.
Mhm.
So I think getting great at OEEQs is what I call that, open
Mhm.
ended, empowering questions.
Yes, love
Um,
that.
and I think that's why you and I have great dinners together, right?
Right.
We kind of have these conversations where I don't need to prove anything to you, you don't prove it to me, but we're curious about
Mhm.
what we're doing and how we're living
Right.
life. And yeah.
Exactly. Well, this has been such a great conversation, Dr. Sullivan. I just wanted to close out um, with, you mentioned your own leadership mantra, but you also have a personal mission statement, and I wanted to read it in just a moment. But I wanted to just ask you, um, what drives you to put this in your website and in your as you're promoting yourself or acknowledging yourself. I just love this. I love this, having a personal mantra and mission statement, because it really helps. I get the connection of your own contemplation on who you are and your own self. But any thoughts about that for others?
Well, number one, I do it for myself so I can see, am I living the person I want to live? Right? Am I
Hmm.
developing to be the person I'm striving to be? But it will also resonate with other people who they will be my best coaching clients. If they look at this and say, that is powerful and holy crap, I need to come up with one for myself. They're the kind of clients that are going to reach out to me instead of the ones who are, such a stickler that they would think of it as only being woo-woo and not of any value. By the way, I've turned around many engineers and scientists who just show me the facts, who now have a little bit of woo-woo in their world from meditation, contemplation, journaling, and all of that. So it's going to connect me to my right clients. That's why it's promoted there.
I love it. Do you mind if I read your mission?
Sure.
Sure. All right. So this is Dr. Patty Sullivan mission statement. Know my thoughts, they become words. Know my words, they become actions. Reflect on actions, they become habits. Observe habits, they become character. Create my character, for it is my destiny. Just beautiful. Wonderful.
And that is not mine. That is actually from the Upanishads, which is a Hindu text that I kind of transpose some of it. But yeah, it really is powerful. It all starts with the thought, right? What are we thinking? And how are we going to create our legacy or our destiny? It's pretty important.
And our daily habits are powerful. By the way, there's a new book by Travis Bradberry, Emotional Intelligence Habits. And I ordered mine the other day.
Nice. I like his 2.0 book.
Yes, that's great too.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to thank you so much, Dr. Patricia Sullivan, coach and professor and guide. Thank you so much for this podcast today on self-awareness, which is a hallmark of emotional intelligence. It's just been fantastic. And like I said, I can think of 3 more podcasts to do with you. So thank you so much for your time.
We can do it. And thank you for your time and interest in this. I know you've been interested for years, and it's a fun thing to play around with. So thank you for letting me speak my truth on what I think I know.
Great. And so I want to thank all of you for attending our podcast. Again, stepping up to leadership, and it's the hopes that we can help you in your next step in leadership and self-awareness. So again, I'm Stephen Oliver, Dr. O, with Dr. Patricia Sullivan. Thank you so much for coming today. All the best.
You've been tuning into Next Steps to Leadership with your host, Dr. Stephen Oliver. You can find this show on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, hrcvision.com. Thank you for your positive feedback, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others.